you present your room there? Okay, then I'll go there. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, Srimati Mukta Sinha, Dr. Taslim Sarif, friends. If India has to become a developed economy, a superpower by 2047, which is what all of us wish to see, I strongly believe that this will happen on top of science and technology. For this, clearly, we need to increase our investments in research, invest money in translational work, taking research to the market, that is commercialization. And we need to also create the structures that are required in order to make this indeed happen. Private sector, there is industry, has a very, very important role, a very important partnership role in making this happen. I strongly believe that government, academia and research institutions, private sector, and if I may add, our defense establishment, because many of the research activities get sponsored by the defense establishment. So these are the 4 pillars on which we will have to create this science and technology infrastructure for the next 25 years. For this particular session, the theme is doubling private sector investment in R&D by 2030. I actually believe that this has to be even more than doubling, because currently private sector is investing approximately, by certain estimates, 0.3% of GDP. I strongly believe that this investment has to go to 1.5%. That means it has to go to 5%, and it has to become sooner than later. I'm happy to say that I am seeing a change in the last 7-8 years. Now, if our startups, our entrepreneurial ecosystem can now attract $25 billion a year, and that's what they have done in the last 12 months, how can we make our research infrastructure, the research ecosystem, attract at least a third or a fourth of that? This is private investment that is coming with the startup ecosystem. So how can we do this? This will come from domestic companies, it will come from multinationals, it will come from public sector undertakings. So it will come from everywhere, and it will come from philanthropic organizations also. So in our panel, I would like us to focus on 2-3 points actually. First and foremost, do we have the right structures to make this happen? What I mean by structure is, when the money comes in, how is it governed? How is reporting done? How is accountability done? Do we have special focus on fundraising in our academic institutions, industry interface in our academic institutions? So that's what I mean by structures. And wherever I have seen successes in fundraising in academic institutions, I find that they have structures, unique structures, and we need to look at what are the best practices and how we can make this actually standard practice across all academic institutions. So, see, traditionally our academic institutions have focused on knowledge dissemination. Now, of course, we are focusing on knowledge creation. We need to look at knowledge application as the third pillar. And when we look at knowledge application, again, these structures become very important and role of industry becomes very important. I believe that knowledge creation, knowledge dissemination, knowledge application, all of them should be very important. The second point I would like us to discuss is co-location. How far or how close should industry be with our research establishment, with our academic institution, etc. And again, there are different business models. I hope Taslim will talk about the C-Camp experiment, which I think, he may not say this, but I will say this. It's probably the best example of a entrepreneurial ecosystem co-located with a research establishment, and a good example of translational research happening. So I strongly believe that location is also very, very important. Structures like research parks, incubators, etc. are very important. Third point, and I hope we will be able to cover this, is how can we incentivize? Incentives like tax breaks, maybe graduated tax breaks, so we can identify maybe specific sectors where we can give incentives, more incentives than sectors that are already where we are very, very strong. So that's one aspect of incentive. The second aspect of incentive, and I'm proposing this here, is where we have the 2% CSR requirement for private sector enterprises. I propose that 1% of that is spent on today's problem, that is to uplift people who are less privileged, less well off, who have challenges today. But 1% of this is spent on solving the problems and creating a better future for ourselves. For example, that 1% could be spent on water, drinking water for the country through research, so that the problem is solved forever. That 1% could be spent on cancer, diseases for which we don't have cures and which are highly prevalent. That 1% could be spent on antimicrobial resistance. That will be a very significant money, and this automatically can be routed. But whenever we do this, we also need to understand that unlike solving today's problems, solving future problems means it's open-ended. Research is not something that will deliver results in a predictable manner. Sometimes you go off on, for example, let's say cure for Alzheimer's disease. We have not found a cure for Alzheimer's disease. Now if you go and spend money, we need to make sure that we give them little space to experiment and fail. Again, I come back to startups. If you accept that out of 10 startups, 8 startups can fail, and the investors are willing to lose money on those 8 startups, they make up money on the remaining 2. Why can't we, on our research, also say that some of the research will fail? How can you expect every single research program to succeed? I think that's something that we need to discuss. So on the 2%, 1% is spent on research, we need to give flexibility to the organizations to produce when research has to be produced. And last, consortium approach, where MSMEs, if they want to participate, we need to look at structures, consortium approach, where they can come together to address the issues. So I will stop here and will request Dr. Akhilesh Gupta to make his opening remarks. And he told me that he has actually specific proposals which again he wants to present to this August audience. Thank you very much. Dr. Akhilesh Gupta.
Thank you, sir. First of all, very good morning to everybody. Whatever I am going to present is, of course, the kind of outcome of the consultation that we did as part of the formulation of Science and Technology Innovation Policy. So I am going to be very brief, but I am just taking forward the suggestion that the chairman mentioned. Let me, these are some couple of suggestions that come out from the consultation with industry, with R&D institution, government and leaders. So the first suggestion is that R&D incentive to industry. And as Dr. Krish mentioned that this kind of, there are some incentives already given, but I think we need some more intervention in this area. For example, one idea is the patent box regime that was introduced as part of the the patent policy in 2016. Good step by Government of India, but we need more incentive. So this, as for the patent box, there is a tax benefit one patentee get as part of the filing and grant of patent. But we need more like infringement benefits and the notional and the kind of benefit that gives from the successive manufacturing. Unfortunately, the innovation is very minimal in the MSMEs, although startup and all others are doing so much of innovation. We need some direct financial support to industry. This is what is the MSMEs have been demanding, and this benefit should be as a mix of loan, equity and grant. We have been mostly giving, for example, the GIRAC model or the TDV models are good models, but a more kind of widening the scope of that model needed in this case. Our team, in Punjab University Center for Policy Research has developed a new public-private partnership model, which is somewhat getting some clue from the international best practices model like Catapult model or Fraunhofer model of Germany and all. Based on that, this model has been developed, and I think we need today the government facilitated but industry-led model. I think in India, except IIT Madras, which has a research park, there is nowhere an effective public-private partnership model in R&D is there. R&D cluster has been very successful. The Office of PSA has been taking initiatives, several city clusters are there, and this is being talked around the world that India, some of these clusters are making big intervention in terms of bringing academia, industry and government together. This we need to replicate. I think PSA has already taken that initiative. It's now going to be more and more cities going to be covered. So this is another demand from the industry, and just bringing this here, that they want that more such clusters should be placed in different cities. There is one issue that is very important, is that FDI issue. So the MSMEs, MNC, the multinationals have been, in fact, kind of a demand had been coming that we should, India, Government of India should provide some kind of incentive for large FDI in the city. The good news is that recently, in last few years, I would say there has been several fold increase in the FDI. Last year itself, there has been 6-fold increase in, if you see the data for last 10 years, there's 6-fold increase in the FDI, equity inflow to country, nearly $343 million has been, kind of brought as an inflow to through FDI in last year, 2021. now that 100% FDI is committed under the automatic route, so this may need more facilitation on this thing. And in fact, some of the states are doing very well. Karnataka is in fact highest FDI inflow, followed by Telangana and Haryana, and then some more states. So I think there's good FDI inflow taking place, and this is really going to be very helping because it's going to put economy on a very high thing. Also, as the chairman mentioned, that CSR fund, now that government has allowed CSR fund for R&D, and more incentives are being provided as part of the CSR use. I mean, this can get further facilitated and enhance this thing. The idea of crowd funding and philanthropic sources funding is also gaining. Once the chairman himself is then he was mentioning more than 350 crore he has invested into R&D. So such philanthropy is gaining momentum in India, and that's going to help so much in, and especially the money available through crowd funding for microfinancing. One issue that government has been working, and we have been kind of working for facilitating, is the public procurement. So this is like policy that whatever project is developed through government support, by say startups or industry or anybody, that should be got back by the government and then should be brought as part of the public procurement system. And in fact, again, TSA has been working on this. DST also has been proposing, kind of working on this thing. How do we bring this as, a quite a policy where the projects funded by government can be brought back to the government for public use. The last issue that I wanted to flag is the state S&T fund. States have been receiving fund from government as part of center sector schemes, but this fund has been S&T is the only domain perhaps which doesn't have any centrally sponsored scheme on with state government. So we are pushing that idea, and this will actually do a lot of impact in industry, academia, collaboration at the state level, because state is not in a position today to encourage research as a core priority issue of their state. These are the issues that I'm just presenting what has come out as a part of the formulation of SCF policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Akhilesh. Very, very specific points, and we will come back to a couple of these things after when we get into discussion. Now let me request Dr. Taslim Sarif to make his remarks.
Thank you. It's not, I'll use this. Good morning, everyone. Dignitaries on the dais. It's a pleasure to be here and also speak among very seniors in the fraternity who are deeply involved in building different aspects of it. What I want to talk about largely is the continuing the approach what Chair has mentioned today, and I think Dr. Gupta very succinctly took it forward in terms of how there is a very interesting view happening where the science knowledge or knowledge generation, knowledge dissemination and knowledge application that takes place and how it gets built forward. If I may look at the field of biotech as a perspective of deep tech or deep science, I think a very interesting trajectory is emerging, and what I want to do today is possibly give you a glimpse of that trajectory very, very quickly, and then possibly link that glimpse to what could be done forward to scale that trajectory up. So biotechnology sector is seeing an interesting trajectory in India over the last 10 years with clear emergence of the very phenomenal work done by equivalents of DBT, BIRAC, DST and STDB, and NITI IIM and many other capabilities which are built in, but very dedicated effort in terms of taking things forward. The schemes like Nimitli and others from CSIR and many other efforts have actually built really phenomenal work. Can we go to the next slide, please? What we are seeing, actually what you see a trend, and there is a dedicated thing, what you see on the left side of the thing is number of startups in India emerging every year in biotech, which is really remarkable. On the right side, what you're seeing is actually Indian biotech industry valuation, and you can see the trajectory is actually significantly upwards. It is not even incremental upward, it is significantly upward, which is showing, I'm showing the two sides of the coin, if I may say so for now. On the left is emergence of biotech, and the second side is emergence of industry valuation, which is really, really phenomenal, while we do know that the dollar valuation is at different stage right now. Even at that billion-dollar valuation, we are really, really, really well. Of course, this is not compared to many other sectors of India, possibly IT sector, but this is an important sector for India. All we know, health, agri, animal health, and environment goes through this sector significantly. And hence, this sector is very, very important. It touches us immediately. It touches all of us immediately, something we need to work on heavily. If I can go to the next slide, please. India's positioning as an emerging leader in biotech startup world is very clear now. And I really want to give a very quick examples of how we are actually slowly and steadily, we are not necessarily saying we are the leaders, but we are actually getting closer to it. And I'll give you quick examples of if I can do that. Can you go next slide, please? Of course, we have really become the, no, can you go to the previous slide, please? Second largest startup ecosystem in the world, which is not at all a small thing at all. People are talking about different characteristics of it. I'll not go into details of each number, considering I have short time. But if you can see this, and then having the presence of Prime Minister to build India's leading effort in terms of biotech startup for Biotech Expo earlier this year, clearly shows the positioning that India is doing as an emerging leader in the biotech startup world. I think we are on this particular path to go forward. And if I can put the next slide. What is the global scenario as we speak? While we saw India, what is the global scenario? And if I can get the next slide on that. With health becoming more and more important globally, along with agriculture, climate, biotech has a very crucial role to play. And these are really crucial points. If I can get next slide, please. This is the top 5 fastest growing startup industries by volume of investment globally. And you just see on the top is healthcare. I think this is a global scenario. And if India, if we are actually putting our efforts in this sector in terms of knowledge generation, deep science, deep tech, this is an effort that we have to come to and take it to the next level. This is really remarkable. The world is going. And now, yeah, you can go to next slide, please. I want to give you a quick perspective from what the chair, Dr. Chris, mentioned about it, what we have been able to do from our little effort at CCAM. We have now around 320 startups. But the best thing about this, according to me, is not only a number, but also each one of them are doing something scientifically, attempting to do globally competitive and a breakthrough science to the next level. And that is something that we heard today. We want science to allow it to be failed and see if some of those, when they become big, the returns are actually much bigger than what we anticipate together. So the boldness in terms of allowing science to fail, boldness in terms of mindset of supporting startup is a very important thing, and some signs of fruition that have come here. So there have been signs of these investments which have been made in last 10 years. The deep science is not the field which is on the market capture base, that if I capture the market of India, I will have that. This is actually a global view. And if I can go to the next slide, please. I just want to show you one example, which is the recent most example. Some of 7 startups at Deep Tech Startup at CCAM, in last quarter itself have raised 550 crores in one quarter. And this is really remarkable, not to say the number, but biotech startups raising the players like Aquapark from Europe, players others, who actually have now invested in Indian startups who are doing globally competitive work in what kind of fields, if I may quickly say those. These are the fields, something that Chris mentioned, antimicrobial resistance, which is bugworks, fields like string bio, which is doing on synthetic biology work for climate, you have iStem for stem cell therapy for vision disorder and neurodegeneration. You have examples like C6, which is using aqua, ocean farming for agriculture, really diverse but really deep science which is globally competitive, and global investors are coming and putting in not because of e-commerce play. And this is something that I wanted to say. This is really a science play which is competitive globally and taking forward. And if I can go to the next slide, please. And this is, again, this is for a glimpse of it. If you can see, what did early stage investment on the left side, second column, if you see, second row, 75 crores were invested in early ideas. What have those in 320 or 300 startups or less? The follow-on funding has been 2,000 crores on that. The early stage risk funding has read 2,000 crores of follow-on funding at the valuation of 6,000 crores in total. And this is what the investment in early stage risk science could actually lead to if you actually handhold it well, if you can provide the environment, the ecosystem, the research and innovation ecosystem together, and the handholding can come together. And this is remarkable, according to me, the way we are going. Not at all to say that we are at the San Francisco Bay Area, we are at the San Diego Bay Area, we are at the Boston, we are there. No, but we are on the way. And if we do well, we can do that. So now, to go there, what do we have to do? I just wanted to come to that. If I can go next slide, please. So early stage funding in deep tech and deep science is actually picking up. It's a very encouraging view that if you do well, this can happen. And very important to know, and I want to put it, deep tech or deep science or biotech is a sector that has a long gestation. And this is going to scale. When you actually seeded it early on, these are going to scale further on. And these are just the early signs. This is not the end of the circle. It is beginning of a fruition circle. And I am very sure it's going to go scale up significantly. And that is something I just wanted to keep a note. If I go to the next slide, please. So what do we need to do? And this is my last slide. If I have taken too much time, this is my last slide. What do we need to do? We are at the early stage of this scale, but this cannot happen on its own. Now we have to intervene and ensure that the fruition stage, the nurturing is at the next level. We cannot keep on the same pace and hope that this will go to the next level. We need to build and test models for public-private partnerships for mid-stage and funding for risk. There is a lacuna in terms of mid-stage risk funding. Government has done a phenomenal role in early-stage funding. At the mid-stage funding, there is a lacuna. There have to be models where we can incentivize VC, incentivize corporates, incentivize government in a way to see these early results and build models to do that. We need to look at models where VCs and industry can partner with government to do that. And there are models globally, including Israel's of the world and others who have done that. And there could be of schemes where the capabilities in the industry, capabilities in academia, capabilities in other sectors can come together. What we need possibly, and this is a for now a suggestion, we absolutely right now need a dedicated structured arm or platform to do that. We may not have multiple schemes, but need one arm to say, this is your mid-stage risk fund capability, and this is where we need to immediately do that. And if we can do it dedicatedly and call for corporates, call for government, call for state governments to come in, I think there is a way that we can build a substantial capability to fund the risk stage, scale-up stage. So but what we need, we clearly need a target delivery of building this deep science-based world-leading innovations from India, for India and beyond. Being in the system, I feel very, very confident that we have the capability to do it, we have the content, we have resources. What we need is now convergence of those. And that is something possibly we are here today. The convergence of resources, convergence of intent, convergence of the other components that we are all working otherwise. Let's converge those and make sure that this does happen. There is a potential and we need to realize it together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Taslim, for those wonderful points. Now let me request Srimati Mukta.
So can I just intervene? Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by our panelists, Professor Amit Prashant, Director, IIT Gandhinagar. We welcome you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let me request Srimati Mukta Sinha, Principal Secretary, Government of Rajasthan, for making her opening comments.
Very good morning to everyone. On behalf of the government of Rajasthan, allow me to sincerely thank the government of India for organizing this center-state conclave, and also to the government of Gujarat for their wonderful hospitality. It's been a delight to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to share how we at the grassroots level, the policy makers, feel. Probably as part of the translational consultation, some of the inputs that we provide might just be useful based on the experience that we face at the field. To sincere gratitude also to the moderator for this session and to all the esteemed fellow panelists. We live in a very paradoxical world, and as our Honorable Union Minister said yesterday, hyper-specialization, and we also know that there is a culture which talks of the death of expertise. So we live in that kind of a world of paradox. I've always believed that the research of yesterday is the science of today, and the science of today is the technology of tomorrow. But what I'm going to speak today is about the role of the policy maker cum practitioner. My 2+ years in this department have been the most wonderful experience that any policy maker practitioner can have working in the Department of Science and Technology. And as Mr. Gopalakrishnan said, that the next 25 years of the Amrit Kal are going to be poised, or rather we are going to pillion ride on the wings of science, technology, research and innovation. My task is very clear here. I have to speak on the 3 pillars of infrastructure, applicability and incentives. And I will only give you a grassroots perspective. We have to posit science as a service provider, because that is how we at the back end of all departments in the state, and that is how a valuation in the eyes of the departments and officers who would want to work will get some recognition, just as the scientists are looking for validation from society because they are confined to the silos of the lab. It's very important that science be pitched in the vision document as a service provider to all other departments, so that what the Honorable Union Minister said from the stage yesterday, that we are duplicating and we are thinning out resources. 20 departments in the government are doing the same startup business with no specialization, and the same trophy startups are presented in function after function. I think we need, as a policy maker, the design of the policy, the interface and connecting the dots will become very, very important. So speaking on infrastructure, I know we have specialists here, very senior people here, who've given a perspective from the point of view of the industry, a little bit on the academia, and also majorly on the research institution. And I'm glad to make note of all the developments that are taking place. But I think if we need to make a change in the next 25 years, then some kind of reverse engineering will have to be done, and focus will have to be from the laboratories in the schools to the laboratories and research facilities in the universities and to the designing. I've also worked in the industries department, both at the center and the state, and I can tell you the way we design architecturally on ground, the design of the industry areas in the state, we talk about the spokes and the hub model, but we do not in the spoke include the research lab. The moment we do it, we will get lot of conglomeration of industries the way AMTZ has done in Telangana. And that is where the investment of the state and the research institutions through the social scientific responsibility or through philanthropy or through crowdsourcing will attract a lot of industries. Also, the governments and the center will have to look at tier 2 industries, because the tier 1 have huge hand-holding over the years. And this is an example that AMTZ has already done. So look at tier 2 who require the government hand-holding. When we talk of policy consultation, it is also important to include in that vertical hierarchy of stakeholders the policy makers. Because if the policy maker who ultimately thinks of making the policy and practicing it is not exposed to the whole gambit of what science entails, then I think he will not be a useful member of this policy making exercise. And I think to everybody sitting here, and also because the Honorable Union Minister is also heading the DOP, so the suggestion is that we include an interaction with the science ministries at the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy for civil servants. So we are exposed, so the moment we go in the field, we also look at things from a science and tech, innovation and research perspective in our interactions with the industry, in the interactions with the academia. There was a talk that was mentioned here about procurement. I think Dr. Akhilesh Gupta ji mentioned, and allow me to cite an example which is a practiced example. And institutionalization is a word that I really, really like, because no policy should fly on the wings of personalities. It should be thoroughly embedded in the system, so that irrespective of people who man departments of policy, it has a firm footing and root. So what we've done in the government, and this is coming from a work that I did when I was handling both Department of Art and Culture along with the Department of Science and Technology for about a year and a half, we were able to digitize 5 of our state art and culture museums without tender. And how we did it? We used the auspices of the Jodhpur IIT Knowledge City, of which I am a part as an advisory member, utilized that TISC startup network and allowed them to develop a prototype exactly in a manner once the NHAI prototype was developed for inviting tender and specifications. So we used that. The tender, which was coming to about 1 crore, came down to only 12 lakhs. And in 6 months of my own tenure time, the 5 museums are ready and up for the people to see. My team who's sitting here from Rajasthan has actually had a session, having seen it, replicating that model today. We are digitizing our science museums in the state. But to point out that using this example, we were able to aggressively, Akhilesh ji always introduces me and says I'm aggressively doing policy advocacy based on experience. So we got the state government to make an announcement in the budget saying that under the RTPP Act, which is the Procurement Act and rules of the state, startups, procurement from the startups up to a limit of 40 lakhs. Of course, there are eligibility criteria for startups in terms of age, registration with DPIIT, etc. But we are doing procurement, and this little case study that I have mentioned fed into institutionalizing this policy about procurement from the startups. There are many more examples that we can provide. One more example of how this vertical integration. My panelists before me have spoken about how do we do horizontal linkages, which is between one institute and industry and maybe between academia. My interest is that while the horizontal thing is absolutely essential, no denying that, sir, but the point is we also need to do vertical integration and no discrimination to the private universities. This thought process, mindset change has to be instilled in the state government, and this can only happen when we are producing new breed of policy makers at Labasna. So our Honorable Minister from the stage yesterday spoke about the Karya scheme, which started in 2017 in the state of Rajasthan, where we are the only state in the country, sir, where our undergraduate basic science, because this whole concept of basic science going down in terms of very similar to civil engineering going down. So how do we make basic sciences important is through a scheme that we have done in the state. I sincerely request people to come have a look at what we are doing, and if you find it useful, please replicate it pan-India, because this is something that will help us in vertical integration. And the scheme is like this in a minute, that UG and PG students doing research in government and private universities in the state of Rajasthan are invited, I'll finish in 5 minutes, ma'am, are invited to become part of the 30, yes, I'll do it in 2 minutes, are invited to be part of the 37, 36 CSIR labs that we have. They get an exposure to the research work that they are unable to do in their own universities for lack of infrastructure, sir. And that is enabling them to make a leapfrog and get associated with different labs and then catapult into doing better kind of research. Also getting mentored at the lab by the CSR scientists who are manning that research. So it opens a door for them. And my last point, there's lots that we can do. It can be a whole day brainstorming, but I'll restrict myself and say that Rajasthan also did something which was very nice about opening opportunities for fellowship, scholarships, internships with institutions that are doing research by doing a science career fest where we introduce the research institutions which were doing research to our various universities and colleges. DST has an annual feature of DST, that is the Department of Science and Technology, calling all the cohorts of engineering, agriculture, IPR, startups, biotech to be part of the DST orientation. We were very happy to have the central DST officers come make presentations about their scheme. So we are all at one page. And because of all that, in the last 2+ years, I'm very happy to say that the Government of India also acknowledges that the ecosystem in Rajasthan for science and technology and also research and startups has improved thoroughly, and also there has been an increase in funding from about 0.7% to close to 2.9% in the state across various departments. I rest my case here, happy to have questions and discussions off the platform if any required. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mukta. A lot of points from the grassroots level. Thank you very much. Now let me request Professor Amit Prashant, Director, IIT Gandhinagar, to make his opening remarks. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Good morning. I'll be brief actually. It's good to speak later because most of the excellent points that have been made by our co-panelists, I think I can build on that. So I'll just mention a few points that in whatever we do, the most important thing to my understanding is understanding the system and creating an ecosystem for that, whatever you want to do. So focusing on the overall game, end-to-end, with the ecosystem to build around it is important, and it all starts with people, focusing on the people with excellence. So my feeling is that if we want to make a big change, we need to focus on people with research skills, translational skills, who have or who can show the excellence in future. Of course, leadership with vision and giving trust to the people who are going to take risk for R&D investments for future. So that becomes important as well. What I feel another aspect, and this is a right platform to say this, is state versus center. If we say global to local, local to global, that phenomena of engineering, you can say concept of engineering in general, if we apply to this, if at local level, at state level, we can identify whatever our strength is and build all the ecosystem for that, instead of everybody running for the same thing, in a way. That may make more sense in some way. You can say, the slogan we use sometimes is strengthen your strength and cushion your weaknesses, something like that. Obvious thing is, and we are always hungry as a research institute to build our research facilities to achieve all that. But on top of that, I'll mention a few things where we generally lack. Test beds are important. If we want to go beyond, you can say, just building science and IP creation and reaching to the level where people would like to see things happening, only then they will invest. But the industry will not be able to create those test beds. That's where the state governments and governments come in picture. And the industry can use those test beds to kind of verify their concepts, validate their concepts or prototypes, you can say. So these facilities are missing more or less. There are some efforts in 5G, etc. recently I saw, but mostly this is missing. In the ecosystem, of course, capacity building has to be on focus and be open about inviting people from all over around you. The new concept that I want to mention again, and it is not new actually, it is very old, that is co-working concept. What that means is, I'm not talking about interdisciplinary, I'm talking about industry and research institution working together on a joint problem at a place, at one place, sitting together without worrying about IP sharing and so on. So creating clarity around that is a major need, I would say. So right now we are, as an institution, we are discussing Research Park is an example of that, you can say. That can create that opportunity, but we need to go much beyond that, where we feel comfortable working with each other, making, you can say, bonds between industry partners and the research organizations, people. Again, focus is on people. In long term, what matters is leadership. Of course, we have to focus on the vision coming from the leadership and providing trust through that. I hope that will create, you can say, more risk-taking capacity in the industry with all the uncertainties around research that come with it in the output, and that will enhance the investment, which is always in such cases for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amit, for very important points and making those points very briefly, very succinctly. Thank you very much. I just want to ask one question to each of our panelists, and then we'll come to audience, and if you have questions, be ready with that. So to Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, now you talked about crowdfunding, philanthropy. We discussed incentives for industry, and you eloquently wanted to reinstate the higher deduction up to 250%. But how do we tap into the wealth that exists in this country in private hands? That's philanthropy. Traditionally, our philanthropy has been towards religion, spirituality, or maybe even education. But into research, I strongly believe that, if you look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right? They're one of the largest contributors to research. So we have to tap into philanthropy for support for research. Any thoughts on that? So that's a question to you.
So, this is an interesting question, because you yourself have been doing this philosophy in some way. So I'll tell you how it came out as an important point for enhancing the private sector contribution. When we did consultation with the diaspora, so we covered almost every country in the world in the discussion. And to our surprise, and I will say this is a pleasant surprise to all of us, that large number of diaspora, especially the industry run by NRIs in the world, they were asking, is there any policy of Government of India where we can contribute to research through philanthropy? And they said, no, we don't expect any kind of return, and we like that philanthropy. So we had this concern. Another thing that, recently, as you mentioned, that there are many, in fact, within the country, many of the top industry in their personal capacity, also they come forward and they want to contribute to it. The problem is only the right policy environment. And of course, when somebody contributes through philanthropy, I think we need some kind of a good response from the government. Should be so. Our estimate, sir, is that this philanthropy can contribute substantially to private sector investing into R&D. I just want to add another thing. Private sector contribution has been rising over the decade. Last decade, the percentage was 27%. And if you see the data, today the percentage is close to 40%, 39% or so. So therefore, there is a good response coming from the private sector. What we need now is going one step forward and have a good trust between government and private.
Thank you very much. Diaspora is actually a very big pool of money that we need to tap into, and we may need to create special vehicles because we have the FCRA rules and things like that, and maybe relaxation of FCRA for contribution to research, etc., may be required. Taslim, you talked about the middle, right? The early stage there is funding. Once the success, the proof of concept and trials are done, definitely risk funding will come, venture funding will come, the middle. And you were talking about not just VC industry, but industry participating. Is there a requirement to, maybe consider this also as research and maybe look at, tax incentives for industry to contribute? And any thoughts on that?
No, thank you, Chris. I would like to believe absolutely. I think there are definitely interesting models where even responsible corporate participation for the phase where it becomes the most risky in terms of taking early ideas, early proof of concepts which show phenomenal potential, but then where the investments requirements are large, is where the larger participation is crucial, and this is where the involvement of both government, VCs and corporates are very important. And I actually have seen those models both in Europe as well as the US as well as Israel, where the corporates like equivalents of GE, Cytiva now, AstraZeneca and others have come forward and built a phenomenal collaborative models to work with the particular components of the drug development or cell therapy or testa beds, something test that you talked about, and say that we want to contribute here, but there are incentives back to them, either in terms of the tax benefits or in terms of the extension of IP related work if that is done that way, or in terms of competition that is in the region that can be done. I also want to kind of share a very interesting model that Clinton Health Access Initiative, CHAI, is doing right now, or others are doing, which is bridging the gap for when the science is about to reach to market, how the market access is also being buffered by such models, which is where government comes in, global governments comes in, where the geography is unable to afford a particular solution. International governments, global governments come in and fill in those gaps. So there are several gaps are there where the feedback or the incentives are built in. But one thing I just wanted to say is that I think I just want to take from what Dr. Gupta mentioned. I think the diaspora, and I also feel that it's a very, very strong opportunity for us to come and say, how can we build a model where something of this nature, even if the risk fund that I'm talking about could come in with government approvals, proper FCRA approvals and so on, it can be done as a national program. Allow them a national standing and they will come running. So if we can structure it, if we can propose a national program and give them now a call to join us, they will come running to see both for impact and if they want return, why not? That also built in. So I think that is definitely an incentive by itself. Both impact is also an incentive, not only return is a financial return, the impact is also a very strong incentive for many people, and I think that could be also built in. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is a very important point, So when we are talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, a component of developing indigenous technology or technology indigenization, actually the kind of import that we are doing on technology today, if you want to reduce technology indigenization, so I just wanted to inform that we consulted something like 20,000 diaspora people and some industry. They are saying that they are ready to contribute for technology indigenization in the country.
Thank you, Akhilesh. Mukta, you talked about, lot of small efforts in government happening in a distributed manner. How can we coordinate better? How can we consolidate better? Is that a function of the science and technology ministry within the government or department within the government, which acts as a horizontal, or is there any other structure that's possible? Because that's definitely required. See, some of us, the structures are created way back, right, 50, 100 years, maybe we inherited from the British Raj. So we need to rethink these structures, and is there opportunity to experiment in the state level?
So in fact, your research happens at the grassroots level. It happens in the state. You mentioned Karnataka, Bengaluru. It is aided by policy structure. So the focus of the policy should be on the design of the architecture of the policy. And that is where you need to do translational consultations beyond the scientists. You were talking of how to get money, and you mentioned diaspora. Allow me to also mention two things which are actually happening. One is that the HNIs are investing big time in startups. In fact, they ask us to recommend startups to them so that they can put money. Startups are like the stock market of ideas today, and people are preferring to invest. That is one thing. The second is, for all the policymakers, kindly tap the alum association of colleges and universities across the country. I have been on board the executive committee for about 2 years for the Lady Shri Ram College. It's an elected thing, and I can tell you, during the floods that came in Bengal, in the lockdown, the alum association of LSR collected a huge amount. So I think that is, IITs are doing it right now, but there is no mechanism for that in the government. So I think if we can incentivize colleges, then the alums would like to make a contribution to the college, and through the college, infrastructure will come to the colleges and make it pan-India. So you will have infrastructure through the alums, the diaspora outside at the tier 2 level. The second thing is that we should now have a bank like SIDBI or NABARD replicable across the country, which can fund startups, because startup is again risk-taking, right? And also the accounting system in the government needs to change. The recruitment that is happening in the state, and I think the central government can only show us the direction, that instead of having accountants who tell us that we can't give projects to the design universities because design is not science, right? So the accountants, it is a practical problem. So change the accounting to investors who will tell you that the governments have to take risk, bet on projects. So those are things that we need to institutionalize in the policy architecture. And just one more last thing, sir. We have to recognize that technology is changing every minute. What 3D was in 2012, today it's robotics, IoT, or something else. A good policy maker is one who's able to anticipate the future and make policy today, and not have the things play out and then think of, then we act as a regulator. So the government has to be proactive in anticipating the future. The policies stay for number of years, sir. There should be a review mechanism which is not used, where we can quickly change the policy if it's not working on the field. So that feedback loop, that needs to be completed, and I think this Center State Science Conclave is a good direction, hearing from the states. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Government's role as enabler before you become an enforcer, right? First enable, then enforce. Amit, a question to you. You talked about research park. Can you very briefly talk about, the company structure that's required for public-private partnership, the Section 8 company?
So the way I think Research Park evolved with time is there is an arm length distance between the organizations that are come as Research Park and the research organization in proximity, which is generally it has been IIT so far. And the ecosystem that is created for Research Park to operate is the ease of transaction around it, bringing new players into the space and with the conditions that are to work together. With certain conditions that it's not a rental space rather than it's place to work together on certain mission, certain objectives. So the structure of Research Park, you can say, provides governance through the IITs in general, but at the same time it provides with Section 8 regulations that you can do, behave almost like industry with all the freedom to bring the industry on board and work with them with all the flexibility that is there in general.
Thank you. We have unfortunately run out of time. Do we have time for question? No, unfortunately run out of time, right? We have unfortunately run out of time. If you have one question, we can take that. Yes, go ahead, please. Please identify very briefly and then ask the question.
Sir, I'm Alok Dhawan. I represent UP State. Just one thing in terms of policy, because policy people are sitting here as well. When you talk of doubling private sector investment, why can't we think of having not a gated community for R&D, but having an R&D institution as soon as it is established to have enough land around it for the industry, and that should come as a policy from the government. It has been done in Taiwan very effectively.
Thank you. Co-location, right? And Mukta also talked about industry.
It's not a park, but it's like industry outside of the university system or any institution that's coming up. Right. That is land is earmarked for that.
Correct. No, that's the co-location. Mukta also talked about Research Park having space for R&D and things like that. Yes, I completely agree, and we need to think about this very seriously. One more question? Okay. So we have had wonderful points, and a lot of good points have come today in our discussion. I would request Dr. Akhilesh Gupta. He has made an effort to consult and consolidate all the points. Today's points also may be added to those. And I suggest, because this is actually a very, very important, as far as I'm concerned, key to actually India gaining leadership in science and technology. We can do it. If 20th century was the century of US, right? At beginning of 20th century, US was nowhere, 1.9% of GDP. Europe was leading, UK was leading. But end of the 20th century, US became #1 economy, and US became the leader in science and technology. I think 21st century, we must make India's century, and we shouldn't wait for the century to be over, but 2047, as the Prime Minister has said, at the 100th anniversary of our independence, we must become a leader, and that requires significant investment in science and technology, significant participation from industry, and we need to look at various ways in which we can make this happen. Mukta, one point I take from you, coming from grassroots, experimentation must be allowed in government. I think that's a key point I would like us to take back. Thank you all very much for this wonderful session. Thank you, Dr. Akhilesh, for inviting us.
Thank you so much to our panelists, our audience, our moderator, Dr. Chris, for such a vibrant and thought-provoking sessions. I would like to announce now we break for a tea for 15 minutes, and then we'll resume our session number 5, that is on agriculture and technological interventions, discussing about Aroma Mission and Purple Revolution. We will join back in next 15 minutes. Thank you. And tea is organized inside this hall only. So we can quickly have tea and just get back to our seats. Thank you everyone.